Let's talk about genes and what made them. Genes, we're talking about selfish genes. Genes are just information. It's information stored as molecules. Molecules have existed since the universe has existed. After the Big Bang, well, at first it was just hydrogen, but then that hydrogen started to amass into big lumps, and then that created a lot of pressure and heat, and then that created other atoms. But after those atoms were made, molecules were made, and so that happened all within a very short time span. Molecules have been around since the beginning. It just so happens that some of those molecules, just by random chance, can copy themselves. And that's basically what a gene is. It is just a molecule that randomly was designed to create itself. And so, how did that molecule come about? So maybe early life isn't a good title, because really, life, what we're talking about here, is before life. In biology, we learned that the only way that living things can be made is by other living things. We called it bio, which means life, and then genesis. But here, we're talking about abiogenesis, which means that at some point, a non-living thing made a living thing. So what was that non-living thing? A lot of scientists think it was something called a ribozyme, and we're going to talk more about that. That ribozyme is basically that molecule I mentioned that could copy itself. And so the next few slides will talk about what conditions were needed on Earth for that to occur. But here's a kind of mind bender for you. Try to stay with me here, because it's taking me a while to kind of understand Schrodinger here. So Schrodinger is the scientist. You might have heard of Schrodinger's cat. It's a famous experiment I won't get into, but Schrodinger had this really great quote about life, and I'm paraphrasing here so that it fits this lecture, but basically, yes, this is what he was saying. Life is a momentary state of order made possible by energy released from disorder. And so, what does that mean? Well, let's first look at the word entropy. I mentioned the Big Bang. Well, it really should be called the Big Expansion. So a long time ago, there was this really tiny, not tiny, I don't know how big it was, but very, very dense group of particles that then expanded and created the universe. That's the Big Bang Theory. It's called the Big Bang Theory by somebody who was actually mocking the theory. It should have been called the Big Expansion. That expansion is still occurring. Entropy is when systems move from a state of order to disorder. So what is a system? A system can be anything. It could be you. It could be a house. It could be life. It could be systems of war. It could be anything that you want it to be, as long as it has parts that are put together. Systems always go from a state of order to a state of disorder. Order to disorder. And so think about it like this. There was the Big Bang, which was every known particle that makes everything in one place. That is the ultimate state of order. And then that expanded to be our known universe. And that is a lot of disorder all at once, right? And so in that process, energy was released. And that created the universe. And so when you go from a state of order to a state of disorder, you release energy. And it turns out that energy itself can create order, which ultimately just goes back to disorder eventually, because it's only momentary, right? So I like to think of it this way. Let's go back to the ultimate state of order, the beginning of the universe. So what happened was there was the Big Bang, and a river started to form. Entropy. Entropy is the movement of systems from order to disorder. So like a river, it has a direction, right? That river flows. Some people think this just goes to nothingness. Some people think this, that it goes back to the beginning and our universe is just a loop. But whatever. So going from order to nothingness, life exists along a detour, a little delta way. So delta ways are things like this. Like if this is the main river here, delta ways are all these little things, these little offshoots. So there's a delta way that formed. And that delta way is essentially life. However, it always flows back to the same thing. It always flows back into entropy. Because, again, it's only momentary. And so, I hope you're still with me here. Here's a great way to think about it. You got the sun, right? The sun exists because of entropy. Essentially what's happening here is fusion. During fusion, energy escapes the sun as hydrogen is converted to helium. Energy escapes from the sun as electrons. I think they're jumping from a state of higher energy to a state of lower energy. As they abruptly stop, they create sort of a ripple. And that ripple is radiation known as light. And it is also heat. And so life exists on Earth. I'm gonna draw it as part of the. So here's the sun as part. The hydrogen was in the first. It was in the universe, and then became the sun. And now the sun is losing energy along our little delta way, and then plants take it in for photosynthesis. That's a plant that went extinct. Here's a plant that did not, right? And so that plant is like a main delta way. And then other living things that ate those plants started to evolve. And from that, carnivores started to evolve. And we get this big, intricate system seemingly created from a system of disorder. And so it's sort of counterintuitive because life is a whole lot more orderly than non-life. Life is about as orderly as it gets. And so it seems very against the common laws of the universe, but it's not. It is only a detour. It is only a detour along the ever-flowing system of entropy. And so it does not really defy physics. You can think of it like this beautiful delta over here. So we've got this delta way here. And you got the river flowing of entropy. And then all of a sudden, you've got stars giving off light and heat. And then you've got things like plants taking it in, and animals eating the plants, and it all still goes to entropy, but it's a beautiful little detour that we all get to be a part of. And so that is basically the fuel of life itself. The fuel of order is actually disorder.